Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week with an album review, which is where we go track by track through an entire album, exploring what each song does in isolation and how it develops any themes or connections within the larger artwork. Today we're going to be looking at a band called Attack in Black, which is a pretty cool name, honestly. We're going to be looking at the album Marriage. This has 12 songs on it, bringing us at 42 minutes and 1 second of total music. Decent number of tracks, bit on the shorter side, lengthwise, probably looking at about a 2:45, maybe a 3-hour video here. Let's dive into it. Most of these songs are on the shorter side. Yeah, nothing really breaks past the 3-minute mark except for two songs, one at 5.5 and one at 4:10. So, yeah, I think we're going to get through this one rather quickly. I have no idea what I'm in store for, though. I've never heard of this band before at all. Haven't even heard their name in passing, so this will be interesting. Let's dive into this first track, Come What May.
But darling, I called out my name a million times. There's nothing to fear. My young, no rest in the divine. When our urges rest in the hands of you believers, I really hope that you're believing.
A nice little touching moment for a second. Nice bass presence. That alternating double snare versus one snare. Cool vocal harmonies. Okay. Sax? It's in the mix a little bit. At first I thought it was a harmonica. No, that's a saxophone. Whoa, dang. Bum, 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 bum. Smooth, the way it just runs through that 16th note lick. There's a really delicate balance between rawness and cleanliness. I kind of want to go forward here into the next one to get a stronger idea of who they are, but I also like stopping early, getting my thoughts out, assuming that this might be the sound of the band, or at least the sound of the album. A couple of things I'm picking up so far. Let's just go off of where I was starting there. Rawness versus cleanliness, right? Everything in here rhythmically is meticulously placed and performed. I don't know if this is something that they're just really good at being in time, or if this was something like they had to do several takes. And the reason I asked that is because of genre, which I have my own biases about genre, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, rhythmically, everything is very particular in here. There's nothing that really tells me that this is a sloppy performance or that they were rushed and had to take the best take that they could. It sounds like they had plenty of time to make what they wanted to make. They had the funding or the budget to do as many takes as they needed, or possibly that they just did it really well on the first or second try. Regardless, the end result is something that is very clean and precise and almost pristine in a lot of ways. There's a strong perfectionist run throughout these performances. You listen to the sound of the bass, and it's a very clear production on it. You listen to the guitars, they're very clean, distinct. There's spaciousness between everything. Production-wise, this is also very high fidelity, adding to that clean feeling of it. But then I listen to the vocal harmonies, especially there at the end, and they're not perfect. They're good enough to get by, but there is some dissonance put into there. Even when you listen to just the lead vocalist and, comparing it to what the guitar is playing, right? In the opening verse, when the lead vocalist is alone, there's some tonal discrepancy in there. And so they really cared about making the music clean and pristine and polished, but vocally they're fine with some rawness to it. They don't use vibrato pretty much at all. I don't think I heard any vibrato in here. Like I said, there's some pitchiness going on. Some people are a little sharp, some people are a little flat. It adds a very folk feeling to it, or like indie rock, right? Where pitch perfection isn't necessarily something to strive for, where the rawness adds to the emotion of the performance. And it dawned on me that it has to be intentional, with so much effort and meticulous attention paid towards the musical elements. You would think that they would put that same effort towards the vocals. Do it again. Take a take. Take 15 minutes to rest your vocals. Right? Get some warm honey tea or something, and loosen up the vocal cords. Right? Your next take's going to be the one we're going to use. Or when did this come out? I just want to make sure. 2007, it looks like. Yeah. So use a little bit of pitch correction on it, but they didn't. They didn't do any of that. They allowed a rawness to come through the vocals. And it's very interesting. Usually when we hear this, it also has a rawer production on the instrumentation to have the synergy of production and performance. But here it isn't. There's this divide. Some of it is pristine and clean and perfect, and the other half is raw and grittier and a bit dirty. It creates a very interesting sound to my ears. I think I'll get used to it. It isn't something that's, screaming at me, hey, this is just totally wrong. It's a unique division in the song that I picked up on. And I'm sure we're going to hear more of. And because of this division, and some of the ways that they write, I'm hearing a multitude of genres in here as well. Vocally, I think the closest I can find, I've already sort of mentioned, is indie rock. Maybe a little bit of folk, especially when you bring in those specific intervals in the vocal harmonies. Definitely feels a bit like folk rock, maybe folk indie rock. We've heard a couple of those songs in the past, and I think this sort of fits that bill. But there's an undeniable punkiness to all of this as well, a high energy grittiness that runs and butts up against the more flowery, introspective indie folk stuff. It's an interesting mix, and so far I don't think, again, that it's done in a way that is counterproductive. But it is something that I very quickly picked up on. And I think another thing that I'm going to have to acclimate to as I get through this track. Because I do kind of run at odds. I mean, imagine, what was that indie? Oh, the microphones, right? Very raw, lots of acousticness, mid to lo-fi production at times, really indie and semi-folk. And just imagine putting some punk guitar work to that. Like, it doesn't sound like it should work. And then Attack in Black kind of finds this interesting way of smashing them together. It's it's something that's going to take a little bit of time. I think their execution is it's way better than it has any right to be. But it's still something that I haven't heard before and something I'll have to adjust to. 3 minutes was not enough. 3 minutes was barely enough time to figure out why it sounded odd or unique. Might be a more positive spin on that description. So, if that's what they're going for, is indie punk folk, I mean, they're nailing it, but it's also nothing I've heard before. So, I hope they are, because that gives me 11 more tracks to get into this style that they're doing. Now, what's actually going on here musically? Chords, honestly. There's not a lot to dig into. We have one guitar riff, and it's, man, I'd say it's borderline entering into the riff territory. It's more just like root notes. Well, we have dyads because both guitars usually chime in together and play the same single note melody at different intervals, giving us the harmony, in which case we have a dyad, which is a chord. It's the smallest of chords, but it's a chord. Two notes, it's a chord. Um, we have a lot of that. The riff itself that the guitars give us, is very minimal, lacking a lot of movement, a lot of held out notes. Sort of like what you do with chords. When we get to the chorus, it's a lot of chords. The rhythmic intensity changes, but for the most part, we have one chord per bar. It's a lot of foundational work. The bass is doing the same thing, though we do have some nice little licks at the end of phrases to give us those punctuating ideas. I like that they gave them to the bass. I hope they continue to do that and allow the bass to shine in ways. Folk music is one that traditionally is simplistic. Not necessarily in general composition, but in the idea that it's a lot of layers of simple ideas. And there's also a heavy reliance on chords as a strong foundation for the vocals to exist on top of. A lot of folk music tends to be lyrically dense and focus on the story of the words, where the music is done as a sort of background painting to give a specific emotion or vibe or feeling for the story to take place in. And we hear a lot of that here. That just comes with the territory. Indie rock also does a lot of chord-based stuff. So, I mean, even punk, when we think about it, punk has riffs, but punk is also very atmospheric and chord-based as well, or can be. So, yeah, we're mashing together three genres that traditionally have mostly been harmony and texture and atmosphere with vocals, and we're hearing a lot of that here. Drumming. A lot of it is kind of mixed. We sort of have two halves with the drumming. We have a folkier style. It's more simplistic, more spacious, designed to create the beat and provide the metronome sound, and that's about it. It's basically get out of the way for the atmosphere to exist and the lyrics to be told on top of it. But we also have a punkier style that we have in a couple of places that is just more upbeat, more syncopated. It does provide a similar role in that it gives us that strong beat to give us that metronome, the tempo of the song, but it is a little bit more flourishy in ways with syncopation in order to create stronger feelings of groove alongside being this timekeeper. Not super flourishy, nothing melodic or I would say super complex about it, and even in those punkier ideas, they tend to be more iterative than exploratory or innovative. just general, I don't want to say cookie cutter, but, a standard style of punk drumming. And then vocals, we have, I don't know, standard styles of folk melody writing. The way that it flows, the pitches that are chosen against the chords we have, it does have a very folk feel to it. And I wish my ears are more attuned to calling out or recognizing chords and chord patterns to say, oh, this is, these specific chords, and that's why it has this feeling and stuff like that. But no, the best I can just say is that it reminds me of folk rock. I'm going to try to listen to more of the atmosphere closely in the following tracks and see if I can't pin an emotion down. Honestly, I was still trying to take everything in and this really interesting mixture of genres. So I didn't quite get a strong hold of what the emotional element was on this one, but there is one last thing I need to bring up, which is the interesting juxtaposition between the more driving energy of the punk sections that carry just a hair bit more aggression to them, a little bit more direct brightness even, and the momentary switches to something a bit more introspective and hopeful. I think he says something like, won't you believe me in me, or won't you believe in me, or something like that. And like the guitars cut out to acoustic, the drums stop playing, there's this huge resonance, the chords switch over to something a bit more ambiguous, with a tad bit of hope, a little bit of positivity on the top of it. And those moments are genius. They really are. The way it just sort of flips the script, and you can feel it. It doesn't feel out of place. It feels like a reflection of what's happening in the story. I'm curious what the lyrics are for that, but I can absolutely feel that where somebody like is just on this monologue, just going and going and going, and then they're just like, wait, is this even what I'm supposed to be doing? And it's that emotional flip that feels right in that moment narratively. And they found a way to put that into the music. And I don't know if that actually lines up with the lyrics in any way, but it reminded me of scenes like that where you can just tell something clicks in the character and their entire demeanor and how they're talking just flips immediately. I thought that was really well done. Um, Real quick on structure, not a whole section. I don't even think I'll put a timestamp for this. It's just back and forth. Ooh, no, one more thing. Okay, there's a timestamp for this now. So structurally, we have 3 verses, 3 choruses, and then a bridge into, I think, a final chorus, I think it was. Interesting, because it does mix, again, punk and folk. A lot of folk rock tends to just be, actually folk in general, tends to be back and forth, first chorus, first chorus, first chorus, A, B, A, B, A, B, just over and over until you've told your story. Basically, your A section is the development of the tale you're telling, and your B section is a type of refrain to hammer home the themes that you're trying to be, that you're trying to pass on to the audience, the themes, or the meaning or the moral of it all. But punk music traditionally follows the ABABCB pattern. Verse, chorus, a bridge to change things up, and then finish on the chorus because that's your hook. That's the thing you want to cram into the listener's brain, so you play it one more time so they can't get it out of their head. This kind of does both. We have more verses than a song would traditionally have, which feels right at home with funk. That's folk punk. It's funk. Ah, jeez, with folk. But it does bring the bridge chorus to wrap the song up like punk does. And rock and a lot. This is a very common thing. So I find that to be really interesting. Just kind of smash it all together. And they do it all within 3 minutes. That's the wild thing. This is a very fast-paced song. but it's the bridge, right? This is what I needed to bring up, but I totally forgot. There's a sax solo in here, and it is funky. It's got some smoothness to it, some cool syncopated ideas. I mean, it's wild when you listen to everything on the track, and it's all rather simple. The ideas themselves are simple. Even when you look at the layering, it isn't creating complexity through multiple layers of simplicity. It's still a simple song once we have everything in place. And then they bring forth this above simple sax solo. This saxophonist feels, I don't necessarily want to say that they feel like their skill levels above the band, because punk isn't really about showcasing skill, and even folk music isn't really either. It's there for storytelling, and folk is very atmospheric and emotional. So, technicality isn't necessarily something most people are looking for in those genres. They certainly exist in some places, but in the general genre, they're a bit on the simpler side in order to facilitate and be a vehicle for other things that they find are more important. But I do think it's interesting that the band is playing at this level of complexity, and then the melody for the sax solo is just a hair bit above that. It doesn't necessarily feel out of place, but it is definitely a bit out of the blue. It kind of hit me. I was like, oh, this group's a little deeper than I expected. There's still more things to toss at me that I'm not expecting, and I find that to be fascinating. They have consistently kept me just a bit off balanced for 3 straight minutes, taking what every time I think I understand what's going on, there's something else. There's a third verse in here. Oh, there's some punk in here. Oh, there's folk in here. The sax solo is actually, one of the best melodies in the whole song. One of the few melodies outside of the vocals in the whole song. Why do they have a sax to begin with? It wasn't anywhere else. So I have a lot of moments like, oh, that's neat going on in this, and it's only 3 minutes into the album. I don't know if they're going to be able to keep this up. The thing about novelty is it wears off over time. Can they make 42 minutes worth of novel music? Yeah, maybe, I suppose. Would that be the best use of their time? It really depends on the band, I think. Unexpect? Yeah, they'll do a whole album of novelty, but that's sort of their shtick, too. I don't know if novelty is this group's shtick, but I've only heard one song, and it's possible the rest of the album is just more of what we just listened to, though I suppose it's equally possible that every track on this album is a totally different thing, and they're one of those bands where, every song is different. So I'm going to hit some lyrics, we'll push on, and we'll see where the album takes us. This is interesting, a bit deeper and introspective than I would have thought. For some reason, there's also not really a lot of lyrics, which surprised me. I remember there being, well, a lot. Felt like we had 3 minutes of lyrics other than the sax solo, and yet it really isn't here. I think it's about somebody who has lost someone dear to them, and it has shaken them to the core, shaken their belief in something, maybe something bigger, something larger, maybe even wondering what the purpose of life is if it can be ripped away so quickly. There is a moment towards the end where there's a little bit of change of heart, but the very end seems to return back to something a bit more negative. Some lines I really like here. Says, when our urges rest in the hands of you believers, I really hope that you're believing. And this the greatest gift to give. I caught a raindrop adrift amidst the feeling of the day, that you saw everything that you loved in living fade. The idea that, see, I think this idea, you saw everything you loved in living fade. So I think he lost somebody. And on that day, they caught a raindrop adrift. I don't quite know specifically what this means. I get the feeling of introspection, though, of all of the raindrops. We typically think of rain as a larger entity. We don't think of the millions of raindrops. We just think of the rain. It is raining now. There is rain on my windshield, stuff like that. I'm being rained on, not I'm being assaulted by a million raindrops. It's about the larger idea more so than the smaller one. But to pay attention to the one raindrop and to catch it, adrift, I think, is interesting, that even as something as natural and expected as the rain, a little raindrop can still be out of sorts. Much like us, one person out of billions can be out of sorts if all of humanity isn't really changing too much from the previous day or month. To recognize oneself in something so small, almost insignificant, one tiny raindrop, to get a little bit of that introspection, a little bit of that clarity, despite your world being turned upside down. I really like that whole imagery. I have no idea if that's what they're going for, but that's what I got out of it. The next stanza just says, nothing matters, nothing's wrong, nothing feels like anything today. Speaking about the coldness of sorrow. Now, this next stanza says, now to open up myself before two suns, the solar sun. There is something to fear in the undying young who yearn to live forever while searching for anything but a door that is always closed. To me, this is the turn. Searching for a door that's always closed while you're undying would be trying to figure out the purpose of life without death. That's how I interpret that. You want to live forever, but you're always going to be looking for that thing to give your life meaning, and a lot of people find that meaning through death. It's what you do with your time here. When time is infinite, what you do stops meaning anything. And he says, that is something to fear. And to me, this is almost a reverse. Okay, this sucks, right? I lost this person. I'm feeling cold and empty because of it, but death is a part of life, not just naturally, but even within the human experience. We need that in order to have a fulfilling life. But then the final two lines is, but I really hope that you're believing, and I really hope it's hope that you abandon. And this makes me feel like that the sorrow begins to take over again. Wants to abandon hope, possibly hope of getting better, of getting through the grief, of coming out the other side, of moving on. I don't know. It's a complicated thing, grief, dealing with loss. And I think it makes sense for a song to be as muddy as this. It jumps back and forth between a positive spin on things, the silver lining, and negative feelings of it. And I think that's how loss tends to be for people. Like I said, it's a lot deeper than I would have expected, and I really love the lyricism here. Even on my first listen, which I'll tell you, first read through, which I'll tell you, I had no idea what was going on. It took me a couple times to start picking up on things. But even just on the first read through, I was just in awe of the lyricism of it. I didn't know what it meant, but I love the way that the words came together, the repetition of words and phrases. There's little motifs throughout here. It's great just as standalone poetry. Not even spoken poetry, just written prose. I think it works on that level. And to me, that's how you know you're going to have great lyrics. You don't even have to have a strong melody because the words themselves are already doing a ton of lifting. All right. We have a 3-minute song and then a 2-minute and 40-second one. That was real short. Unless I can find a reason to stop after the second track, probably just going to push through and do the both of these back to back. Let's kick it with the next one, Young Leaves. Okay, this one has more of a rock feel to it, classic rock even a little bit with the way this melody is written. Okay, yeah. Not really indie rock. A little bit of folk still, but not punk like we had on the last one. Oh, okay, it feels very indie now. They're like chameleons. Every bar, they just incorporate different influences. It's wild. Beautiful, uplifting. I love that. I don't know what that reminds me of. Got a little bit of grit on those vocals. Na-na-nas. Wow. Great harmonies again. Oh, tambourine. I think we had that earlier. Trumpet? Okay. So are we going to get a different ska instrument solo every song?
In the dark's an empty home, like 1,000 stories begging not to go untold. But in the light,
A little bit of a country vibe with that. Oh, okay, the build up. Oh, the trumpet's in on the chorus? Yeah, see, there's grit though. And the vocal bit isn't perfect. Very little space between the songs too. Didn't even feel like the typical 2 seconds gap. Bass coming through, giving us that strong foundation. Oh, we got a really cool guitar lick here. The vocals even have a little bit of a grunge feel to them. Okay. I take that back, not grunge, like post-hardcore. I love the synergy, rhythmic between the bass, drums, and vocals on that pre-chorus. Yeah, very fun ride cymbal stuff. Yeah, a little bit of a yell there. Yeah, so about 6 minutes of music there combined. Chameleons, right? How many sounds do we have in those 6 minutes? A little bit of country there, a little bit of a twangy, a little bit of guitar work. The punk came out just a little bit stronger, especially there at the end with that yell. Um, yeah, it's. Oh, we also had like a classic rock vibe at the beginning of Young Leaves. Yeah, it's I mean there's an underlying part here, right? Folk rock, indie rock, classic rock. They're definitely a rock group. They have some punk influences. They have a little bit of classical. They have some ska in here, which I guess also kind of aligns with the punk side of things. The trumpet solo definitely felt a bit more ska-ish, rock-ish, but the sax solo in track one kind of gave me some jazzier vibes. So we didn't have any additional instrumentation on track three, though. I know we had tambourine in one of the two. I'll be honest, the two songs kind of blurred together a little bit for me as far as details. Um, but yeah, I know we had a tambourine on one of them. So we are still getting new instrumentation, but we didn't have any wind instruments on track three. So yeah, they're still creating something a bit unique, and they are being a bit consistent though. As I mentioned, after track one, this could have went in any direction. You know, every song could have been totally different, but no. What we heard on track one is fairly indicative of what we heard on tracks two and three, and I'm gonna wager that it's what we hear a majority of on the album. We have two longer songs. One of them's the last one, and being that there are some there's an emotional run on this, right? Lyrically for track one, it's a bit deep. Musically for all three tracks, there's a strong emotional component to them that runs a bit on the moody side of things. So I'm gonna wager we probably have maybe a ballad or two on this track. My guess would be the two longer ones, track 6 and 12. We'll see how that prediction goes as we get to those songs. But yeah, I think a majority of the songs are going to be like this. I think they're showing us who they are right from the start, and it's going to be a consistent album. Now, I wrote down simple ideas, and I kind of touched on this a little bit from the opening track, but it's continued to be prevalent throughout these next two as well. It's not super complex music, which, as I said, it makes sense. Given the influences, given what kind of musics they're working within, it is becoming a little bit more complex. We're hearing some really strong melody writing coming out of the guitars. We had a couple of cool riffs on these last two songs. However, a majority of the tracks are still chord based, really focusing on that harmony, foundational atmospheric stuff. The guitar riffs, playing melodies, it's not the status quo. It's what they do sometimes when they want to break up the chords. And I do like the melody. I think it was on Hunger of the Young, track number 3 there. But some of the classic rock sounds, and even a little bit of those country ornamental ideas on Young Leaves I think worked well and also showcased a little bit more of their chops there too. So, I mentioned on track one that most of the music was simple, but the sax solo was like a step up skill wise, and that I wasn't sure if that was the band just not having the skill to play up to that level or if they didn't want to. And I think the more that we've listened to this album, it's fairly clear to me that they are simply playing easier ideas because that's the type of music they want to make, more so than any skill restriction. They are showcasing a couple of chops here and there at the guitars and the bass with little licks or ideas or even riffs at times, but it's just not the kind of music they want to create. They're very atmosphere and emotionally driven. They want you to feel a specific way while you listen to these words and get that total package of the emotion from the lyrics and the emotion from the music. And if a riff is going to help that, they'll go for it, but if it isn't, the harmonic information, the chord progression is the most important element, and so that's the direction they'll go. That seems to be how I interpret their music so far. Just 10 minutes or so into this album, but I think that's it. We're going to be listening to a lot of simple ideas and a lot of chords on this album that's designed to make us feel a specific way, and probably get told some heavy lyrics along the way. Now, I did mention the instruments already. We have sax, we have trumpet, we have tambourine. What else are they going to include? I'm looking forward to all that. But all of this also leads into something else because these instruments tend to pop up at specific points of intensity. And this is what I want to bring into this topic right here, is shifting intensity. They are sort of masters of moving between highs and lows, and they make it seem so effortless. I think that track right there, coming out of the bridge back into the final chorus, was one of the few times where I felt we had a harsh transition, something that was immediately apparent to me. I don't think we've had a lot of motifs or foreshadowing or anything like this where I would say that the songs are totally cohesive, but there just haven't been any moments where I was taken out of it because of a harsher transitional idea, except for that one moment, which is pretty good. One time out of 10 minutes, I'd say is good for me, right? As usual, harsh transitions are not a bad idea. There's no such thing as bad music making. You want to use that tool, go for it. I just tend to be very specific and biased about when they get used, how they get used, and I tend to like more smooth music than rough stuff. So, uh, like I said, 1 out of 10 minutes is pretty good for me. But they do have a nice smoothness between, even just look at the chorus to Hunger of the Young. There's four intensities in there, coming primarily from vocals, vocal layering, vocal delivery, drumming technique, drumming rhythmic frequency, and harmonic information. There's a lot of factors that go into it, and for a chorus that only takes 25 seconds maybe, there's four very different intensity levels in there. It is a constantly evolving sound, and I absolutely love that. It's so cool to listen to it, especially if you don't just take the chorus in, uh, completely. Just sort of focus specifically on the drums and listen to this pattern, and then this pattern, and then this pattern, and then this pattern, and then sort of rewind it back if you need to, and go in and listen to the guitars or listen to the vocals, listen to when there's a layering, when we have the harmonies on the vocals, when the vocalist shifts from something a bit more pleasant to something a bit more screamy, putting a little bit of grit on there. And you'll notice that everything seems to line up in a way that masterfully controls the flow of the section without really changing how it sounds. It is still that punky, folky rock sound, and yet they're completely in control over how the listener is feeling, and it sort of slips under the radar just how diverse that whole chorus is. And that, in a nutshell, is sort of how they control a lot of these songs. I touched on this earlier, speaking about track one, with the heavy intensity pulling back for that introspective question about belief before going back into the driven writing. I hadn't quite noticed it at the time to put it in larger terms yet. And we were like 3 minutes into the album. But yeah, they have a phenomenal control over intensity, feeling, vibe, and they don't even have to drastically change the atmosphere of a song in order to control the intensity levels. And they do it with a plethora of sound. I mean, the drummer in the chorus, like I said, 20-25 seconds, goes through like 6 or 7 different patterns. It is phenomenal. And all of it is in service to allowing the chorus to have this evolving intensity to it. Now, I don't know if I should bring this up quite yet because we haven't dove into the lyrics yet. So I have 1 point of data for lyrical themes, 3 points of data for music. It's a bit lopsided. But Come What May had some heavier lyrics to it, but musically it was sort of mixed. Had a bit of a punky aggression to it, but also had some of that introspective stuff. I will say though, I never mentioned sorrow. Listening to Young Leaves and Hunger of the Young, I also wrote down that these have more of a positive spin to them, with Young Leaves particularly being upbeat. I'm curious to see where the lyrics go, but I think this is going to be one of those albums where there's going to be a division between lyrical and musical themes. And we'll see how I feel about that going forward. It didn't really distract me in Come What May, but I didn't really think about it either, which I suppose goes in the way of distraction. But I'm curious if I'll stick with this on the larger idea, because generally, while I do think it's interesting to mix emotions across various elements of a song, casually, I do enjoy when everything lines up. And I've brought that up before in the past. So let's dive into the lyrics of these two and see where they're taking this upbeat, positive music with the words. Alright, Young Leaves. There's only 3 stanzas on this, and it's riddled with metaphor. The first stanza speaks about a shadow clinging to a devil and an angel clinging to mystery, like young leaves. The second is a void wanting to be filled, waiting on the world to lend a spirit that's truly free and fragile as young leaves. And the final one is about a scar, an empty hole, filling with thousands of stories. Ending with the line, "For our shallow lives be appeased by nothing more than young leaves." So we do have contrast in here. The devil and the angel, a void, emptiness, and filled, and a scar whose story of how it came to be is limitless. Thousands of stories could go into it. Everything working with opposites. What does this have to do with young leaves as the simile continues to be brought up? All of this, like young leaves. And I'm not entirely sure. What is a young leaf? It says, the second stanza says, free and fragile. But young leaves are not really free. Fragile, yeah, but they're contained to a tree branch. Or the stem of a flower. Or anywhere else that leaves grow. They're not really free, are they? Old leaves, the ones that fall off, they're free for a little bit at least. There's a transience to that. Eventually they'll hit the floor and wither, but young leaves? I don't know. I'm a bit lost on what specifically this song is supposed to be going at, but there is something of a, not necessarily a melancholy, but like trying to impart wisdom. That's sort of the vibe I get from the lyrics. maybe like imparting wisdom from an old man. That's kind of the vibe I get from the lyrics. Using their life, the mistakes of their lives, even to try to teach this next generation of young leaves. A terrible use of that metaphor. Trying to work it in some way. And the song is very upbeat, though. So that's 2 for 2 so far of having a bit of dissonance between lyrical themes and musical ones. And once again, the next track also goes a bit over my head. It is also 3 stanzas. I think I'm just going to read every line because I do find something powerful about these words that I can feel even if I don't understand. Please pay us mind with some smoke across the sky and a flower left to honor life. Maybe happiness is wealthy if you spell it right. A bird kissed to the treetops at night. Trying hard to put to page all the words that are defined by everything we never said and the broken things in all our lives. An end of summer streets to take a breath from shade to sun, looking for something to love while somewhere someone's making something bound to come undone to feed the hunger of the youth. I don't know if y'all felt that in any way. I do like that second stanza though. The difficulty of writing down all the words, writing down the story of everything that was left unsaid and the things in our lives that are not the best. Those are usually the stories worth telling. There's certainly good happy stories too, but the difficulties in life are great for drama and tension, which are necessary even in happy stories. But there is difficulty in that, and to me that stanza just reads about the pain that is required for art to be created. How that fits in with the other 2 stanzas, though, I am at a huge loss. Both of them seem to be about trying to figure out a way through life. As it says, the idea of feeding the hunger of the young. Youth tend to want to make something of themselves. As you get older, society beats you down, and maybe your dreams become less fantastical. At one point, you realize you're not going to be the next Metallica. Maybe at another point, you realize you're never really going to make it big in music anyways, and you just end up going to do a cubicle job. But when you're young, 15, 16, you have your entire life ahead of you. There's a hunger to that. Maybe that's what it's about. I don't know. Continues the pattern though. I really enjoy the lyrical writing even if I don't understand the lyrics. Pushing forward, we're going to look at the next track called Inches and Ages. We'll probably run that into track 5, Marriages. Track 6 is our second longest on the album. No, it is our longest on the album. We'll probably do that in isolation. Let's move into track 4. This is the second time that they've started off with emphasized left channel. Nice little bass lick here. Yeah, so they stick. Okay, I'll hold my thought on that. There's more of that control. This chord gets held out. And now we have moved through them faster. That's very punky, to move through progression rather quick in a small amount of time and hold on to other chords. But once again, just controlling the pacing of the music. I mean, that's... all snare. Yeah, so we've had a lot of twangy guitar licks, but I think this is the first part that's actually felt very country. Some more showcasing of their melody writing. Oh, interesting, with the snare here. Oh, of course, didn't do it this time. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a fun little piano. Also, first time piano, right? I don't think we've heard that before. Very pop punk with an indie rock chord progression. Yeah, that's fun. That's even brighter than pop punk usually goes as far as the progression sits. Or at least my experience with pop punk. I gotta ask my sister if she listened to this group, because it sounds like something that especially this song particularly, but she was into that indie folk stuff back in the 2000s too, so probably I guess the 2010s, right? Also has just a tad bit of post-hardcore in it too. Oh yeah. Oh, they didn't bring it back. Okay, they just let that last chord sit. There we go. A little bit of the rise there I was expecting the first time. Oh, I love the bass work here. interesting, the restraint the piano has while everybody else is just driving, growing, expanding. Wait, is this gonna run into the next? Now, y'all gotta give me time to process what just happened.
If priests are princes, hollowed, shadowed souls, if devils are but angels cast to know,
I feel like I need to take a seat. What in the world?
I live forever with a sharp regret.
Yeah, I just gotta focus on the music, right?
It might be a surprise to know I never wished for death. A hint of misery made its way.
I call track 6 being a ballad, though.
To those who never harm or never wrong, if honesty changed the hearts, then who could contend? If
Oh, the bass walk down. All the vocal work in the background is phenomenal. Very wide layering too, filling in what... Is that the sax again? Off on the left?
If all I thought were true.
There's something off to the right that I can't quite place. Kind of sounds like a fiddle, violin, but it's tucked in the mix a bit. It's hard to hear all the details. Part of me thinks it's also the trumpet given the range, and we've already had a trumpet.
Sky in shards, our worlds unravel parts.
Dude, the silence is such an inspired idea. Oh, sneaking it early there.
If honesty changed the hearts, then who could contend? If all I thought were true, in this great divide that is my life, I fear to think of all that I don't do.
there's a solemnness to it, a little bit of sorrow, but there's also so much positivity, and I think that's really what this album's aiming for. It's got the silver lining. It's about seeing the positive side of things without completely disregarding the negative.
Hint of misery made its way along to those who never harm or never wrong.
Okay. Just kind of ended in a weird spot. I think that was in the middle of a phrase too, right? Like if we were in a stanza, that would have been the third line. I was really expecting that fourth. I think harmonically too, we were in the middle of the chord progression. I don't know, every part of me was like, there's still one more line, and then just sort of unceremoniously ends into silence, and I'm like, oh, there's 3 seconds left. I guess that's the end of it. Other songs, though, I felt like there's no silence between the tracks. Definitely no silence at the end of tracks. And then we just had track 5 that just, when I use the phrase, one track runs into the next, whenever I describe that there's no gap between two songs. Usually that a musical idea carries over from one to the next, but this one literally ran into it. Two very different songs just smashed right together, and you just move from one idea to the next, and you're just tossed right into the new concept. Yeah, so that was supposed to be just 2 songs. Kind of wanted to stick with just talking about those two, but with that transition, there's just no way I could stop it. It was on destination, and who's I to say that that's not where you're allowed to go? So yeah, 3 songs in a row. Pretty rare for me to do that on any album. Definitely didn't want to do it here, especially into the longest song. I like to isolate those. They have stuff to talk about in them. Okay, track 4. Track 4. This was the country one, Inches and Ages. I really like this because so far, we got folk, we got punk, we got classic, we got classic rock, we got indie, a little bit of hardcore in here, and a little bit of ska, but everything's done in intervals. It is generally a folky indie rock sound, and sometimes there's a country twangy type guitar. Sometimes there is a cool sax idea that's a little jazzier. Sometimes there's a straightforward trumpet idea that gives it a ska-ish feel. Sometimes we got some classic rock riffs coming out the guitar, but it's all sometimes. I think this is the first one where they really lean heavily into one of their sounds that isn't the folk rock that I think really defines everything. And we lean heavily into this country thing. We get it through the guitars, we get it through the saxophone, we get it through the chord progressions. Everything has this bluesy country vibe to it. And we still have pieces of other things. There are still some punkier elements in it, some folkier elements in it, but the foundation is different on this one. It is foundationally country. And I really like that. It comes at a good time too. 10 minutes into the song, we're a quarter of the way done with the album, track-wise and lengthwise. Switch things up. Coming off of Hunger of the Young, I was like, okay, so I have a good idea of what this band's doing. 3 songs now. Everything's consistent. I'm expecting more of this. And the song after that, they're like, well, let's change it up on them then. And that's exactly what you want to do. That's where contrast needs to come. You can certainly add contrast earlier than that. And sometimes it's better to leave, well, actually, in my opinion, it's always better to leave the audience wanting more than to have them ready for the next thing, ready, for them to be bored. So I would err on the side of putting contrast in too early, whether we're talking about a single song or an entire album. But there's always a good point, a good middle point, which is going to change from listener to listener. But I felt that that was a really good point. And I'm glad that they switched over there because I was like, okay, I now have a taste for the album. And they're like, no, you don't. Immediately after I felt comfortable, that's a good place for contrast. And so we do. We get inches and ages, and it flips the script a little bit. It isn't a total overhaul, but it's enough of a change to feel like a breath of fresh air in an album that I thought I had pegged down. And then, of course, after that, they said, hey, we got some punk roots, right? We got some punk roots, though? Bam, comes out a post-hardcore track. Love this. Driving energy, straight eighth notes from the guitars through a lot of this. Lots of snare work, giving that aggression and heavy sound that we don't necessarily have everywhere. It is the heaviest track on the album so far. The vocals are definitely punky. They're very hardcore, borderline yelled, lots of raspy crispiness throughout the entire track. We have some harmony in here, which works well with that post-hardcore vibe. It is, yeah. Once again, we shift over to one of their influences, socket that in as the new foundation, build things off of that. It isn't a pure post-hardcore track. There are some country vibes to it. I think the twangy guitar comes in one of the places. The folk stuff comes in. The melody writing through the chorus is definitely not very punky to me. It has more of that indie rock vibe. But again, it's about... It's a modular approach to writing. They say, hey, we have these, 5 or 6 styles that we can play within, and then we have these slots, right? Foundation, harmony, texture, melody, and then you just sock it in. Well, this one, foundationally, this one's going to be punk, so let's put punk in that foundation. So now what are we going to do for accentuating ideas? Well, we'll put country in there, and that's where we get those little 4 or 5 note twangy riffs. Harmonically, what's our chord progression? Oh, this one's also going to be a little punky. Okay, slot the punk in there, And every song they can just dump out all their modular pieces and start socketing things into place and building something, similar but different. And I absolutely love that. It is so cool for them to understand how all that works, because it isn't like, oh, we understand country chord progression, so if we want something to sound bluesy or country, it's going to be in the chord progression. No, they know all of it. We want some we want some bluesy ornamental ideas. Okay, bam, I got some. We want a country style melody for the lead vocalist. Hey, we know how to write that too. Socket that in there. It's just very cool to see a group that's as flexible as this while retaining, here's the important part, while retaining a core sound. There's certainly bands that are very flexible, and I know I bring this up, but it's recent for me, so it's going to be in my head. It's and You Will Know Us by the Trail of Dead, and we checked that album out a couple months ago, and like every song was different. They all had some sort of signature sound that I attributed to the band, if I remember correctly, but all the songs are wildly different though. Oh, another one would be Pain of Salvation's B, which we checked out only a few weeks ago. Very different styles. All within generally rock and metal-esque, but every song had a very distinct personality. This isn't that way. It's flexible while retaining a sound. All of the songs so far are very, certainly in a very similar sonic profile. I wouldn't say that any of these feel too far divorced from the others. It's a very cohesive listening experience through this first half. But every song is unique enough for me to say, oh, this is the punk one, the post-hardcore one. This one's the one that's more country. This is the one that's more ska. And just having that little bit of extra emphasis on a specific style helps alleviate something that I've run into often with some bands. is the albums go by in a blur, and that all the songs sort of bleed together, and I get done with the listening experience and I go to fill out my spreadsheet. I put in the year it came out, the artist, the album, what genres it was, what my favorite song was, if I liked it or not. Then I get to the notes section and I think, I don't know. It's all just one heaped experience. I go to write down my favorite song. I'm like, I guess they were all my favorite song. I don't really think any of them is any, vastly different than the other. This is not one of those experiences. It's cohesive enough for me to say, yep, this is an album. It's not, a compilation, or it's not a sampler disc. It's very much one unified sound. But the songs are distinct enough for me to be able to point them out and say, yeah, I enjoyed this one more than that one because this one did this differently. And I'm a huge fan of that. Just enough contrast to keep it interesting, but keeping that cohesion high in order to allow it to fully form. And that takes us to track 6. Absolutely nailed it, saying that this would be a ballad. I'm fairly confident saying that we're going to go back to the sound that we've had for tracks 1 through 5, for 7 through 11, and 12 will probably be another ballad. Let's see if I predict that correctly going forward. Dude, the transition here, though. I can't wait to get to the lyrics because I feel like these two songs are supposed to be two sides of a coin. That's why they smash into each other like that. It's supposed to be this abrupt shift. It was very jarring during the reaction. Um, they take us to a new height. Like I said, track 5 is the heaviest the album has been so far. Definitely sitting closer to the hardcore punk side of things than anything else. And then they're like, also, right when we get to a peak of intensity, because we had the buildup at the end of Marriage, right? We get to the peak of it. We have this gentle piano underneath, which I thought was really interesting. I don't know what it means, but there's like 3 notes from the piano for every, 12 from everyone else. It was a very sparse piano line. And in the middle of a sentence, we just pump the brakes hard and slam into ballad mode. Yeah. I don't know that I have much to say about if all I thought were true. Is that what it's called? Yes, track 6. Um, it's pretty much some of the stuff that we've been hearing, especially with a track like Come What May and Young Leaves, but half the tempo, half the notes, harmonically, melodically, very similar writing. They're definitely well within their range here. They've just slowed everything down. They put this somber atmosphere around it all. And allows it to carry some weight. But once again, there is a positivity to it. And I think this is really cementing home what I think are the themes of the album, which again is finding a positivity, finding a light within the darkness. It's why the lyrics are as heavy as they are, while the music is as light and fun and dancey as it is. Not every song is fun, but they're all energetic. They all make me want to move my body. I'm pretty sure other than track 6, I have done some sort of little shoulder shimmy or head bob or something to every song on this album. It is just really catchy bopping music. Never used that to describe a song before. Probably won't ever again, but you know what? It fits here. This music bops. So I find it really interesting when we take it down a notch. Like I said, harmonically, atmospherically, there's still a silver lining here. There's still a brightness that I think they're aiming for, but it feels more somber than anything else. And it's almost as if this concept of dancing through the pain, right? Of trying to see the brighter side and trying to get through this grieving and getting past it. It's not always as easy as the songs make it seem. The happiness just happens to always be there in the music alongside the heavier lyrics. This is one of those moments where it feels like, maybe the truth is it's not always easy to get through things. I don't know if that's necessarily what the lyrics are going to go for, but I do enjoy that juxtaposition. Even if it's not, just from a contrast perspective, album pacing is really good to put a ballad here. So maybe that's all the thought that went into it, but given how deep their lyrics are, I do think that there's going to be a little bit more to it, and I wouldn't be surprised if I could find some sort of synergy going on lyrically with this track and its decision to push towards something a bit sadder. Oh, we also had like all the instruments here, right? This one had the tambourine, sax, and I think the trumpet too. I'm still not 100% sure on what the right panned instrument was. It was tucked away in the mix. There was a lot of stuff going on. And like I said, it ends unresolved too. I almost forgot about that. It feels like it ends in the middle quarter or like the third quarter of an idea, and there's like more to say, more to do. The music wants to keep going, and they just don't. Let me hit some lyrics, see what's going on with these three tracks, then we'll enter the back half of the album. Inches and Ages is beautiful, and it is about not succumbing to sorrow. The opening stanza says, I'll not often think of oftentimes in sadness. I'll not let a lovely life become a lonely mess. I'll not rest a moment neath some broken veil, for if undisturbed its sorrow would prevail. The idea that, yeah, my past hasn't been great. He says that it's filled with oftentimes in sadness, but he doesn't think of those. And he doesn't let himself become a lonely mess. Because if he does, the darkness can prevail, and he can fall and sink into these spirals. And he doesn't do it. The second stanza is easily the most beautiful thing I've heard on the album so far. Distances from star to star, like lonesome endless time, inches to our eyes are ages in our lives. I love that. It's so beautiful. The distance between lots of stuff. I mean, the surface level read here is stars. When we see them in the sky, they're so close together, but of course, that's just the light given off from, I don't even know the distance measurement you would use. Light years? Is that what they use for all that space? I mean, sometimes it's even so far that the star itself is burned out, but we're still getting the light transmitted to, our atmosphere. We can still see it. That's how far away these things are. Inches to our eyes are ages in our lives. But I think the metaphor here is about people connecting with each other. How he says it's like lonesome, endless time. If you keep yourself at arm's reach from everybody, it only seems like, the foot and a half that your arm is. How long is an arm? How long is my arm? No. That's a weird thought. Uh, it doesn't seem that far, but that distance you put up between people is massive. It's a gulf. If you keep everyone at arm's reach, you don't really know anyone. And it talks about how deceptive small things can be because they have large implications. Particularly with this idea of not being broken or allowing yourself to be broken, but not focusing on it, not dwelling on the negative, and trying to be better. Part of that is letting people in. You got to get rid of those inches in order to reduce the vast distance between people. I love it. Beautiful stuff. Marriage, I'm trying to piece this metaphor together. I kind of get it at the beginning. Our first stanza says, if it's mine to give, it's gone, lost or left somewhere along the way, and forgive my honesty, but you can have all I'll never be. This idea that in a relationship, he feels expected to be someone, to provide something. Possibly in this case, it could be love. If it's mine to give, it's already gone. I lost it or left it somewhere along the way. Yeah, I think it might be. Just all encompassing love, the positive elements of a relationship, the safeness you feel being in one with somebody who is, a good match for you. And he says, honestly, I don't even care. You can have everything, that'll never be your expectations for what you want out of me. I can't live up to it, so whatever, I'm out. But then we shift to an apocalyptic world where machines have quit. He says, and then there'll be ones like me who don't see fit to play a part with moving along with no pity for the deadest ones. And everyone with a soul will fall in love, buildings bend and punch clocks rust, heaven-longing eyes will live their lust. For everyone in the dust who can't recall, smokestacks choke and billboards fall, a painting hung on every wall. So far into the future, maybe electricity just stops working and we get sent back, thousands of years and hundreds of years, I guess, in technology. And so machines quit working and I leave. I don't fit in with this society. There's no work anymore. It says the punch clocks are rusted. Everybody's just falling in love. Going back to the idea of a painting hung on every wall, making me think of a house, a fully furnished house, probably with a family, portraits of family, relatives along the walls. At least for me, it's a very stereotypical idea of a grandparent's house, especially a grandmother who likes to put pictures everywhere of all of her, nieces and nephews, granddaughters, children, uncles, their fathers and mothers. Like, they see, just in my family at least, the grandparents have a lot of pictures on walls, and that's what it reminds me of, a painting hung on every wall. He says, can I be this miserable? Will it count to be this careful? I really like that because occasionally people can rationalize their distance from other people. I'm protecting my heart. It's been broken too many times and they don't let anyone in. I'm just being careful, right? Yeah, it's miserable, but I have to. I have to take care of myself. That kind of idea. He says, but if everyone is this sad and cold, please pass the pill. I've seen everything to see, and I can't breathe around such company. If it only proves my frailty, I denounce my humanity. This is the saddest song on the album so far. For a series of lyrics that have been, yeah, things can get bad, but I have to look on the better side of things. I have to accept that other side, or else I will spiral into depression. This is the reflection of that depression. And I think it's interesting that it's paired with the angriest, most driving track on the album. It is an angsty song about somebody who lets the worst parts of them take over. It's no longer optimistic. It's pessimism at its finest. Even going to the point by the end of saying, fine, if I have to denounce that I'm human, so be it. I won't engage with my emotions at all. I will shut down and keep everybody at arm's bay. Because I refuse to be frail. I refuse to be hurt again. I refuse to be shattered and broken. Yes, this is nuanced and I absolutely love it. And it's not even just nuanced within itself. It works so well in context to every other bit of lyric that we've seen on the album so far. Up to this point, I was like, yeah, I'm enjoying the album. I'm enjoying the message. It's going to be a one and done, though, I think. where I'm glad I've listened to it. I enjoyed it from an artistic perspective. I enjoyed it a little bit from a sonic perspective too, just casually. It's nothing in here that's really offensive to my ears. But at this point, I'm like, actually, you know what? This might have to go into some rotation because this is good. This is poetry. This is art. So, if this song used that phrase, a painting hung on every wall, over and over and over until we crashed into the ballad, what are the lyrics of the ballad about? And here we find a culmination of that. I'm not quite sure what the transition is supposed to speak on. Maybe it is the idea of two sides of the same coin. But this is also a point where I'm slowly coming around to the idea that this might be a bit more conceptual of an album than simply just all being thematically similar. This song is about somebody who is unsure of life. As the title states, if all I thought were true. They're not sure if what they know is the truth or not. The opening of the song starts with, if priests are princes, hollowed shadowed souls, if devils are but angels cast to know. The idea that I don't know how things are. Are priests just shadowed souls? Are devils just angels? Where does the truth lie if what I've been told in the past isn't always truthful? There is also regret here. He says, it might be a surprise to know I never wished for death. A hint of misery made its way along to those who have never harmed or never wronged. There is some disillusionment here, stating that even people who have done nothing but right in their life can still experience the worst things. They can still find misery. This next stanza I think is awesome. It says, if honesty changed the hearts of men, who could contend? I really like that. But honesty doesn't change the hearts of men. More often than not, lies, as we continue to see, even in present day, that lying is more likely to change somebody's thoughts or opinions than the truth. And a lot of people can hear the truth and just completely reject it. So, the idea is that honesty really isn't all that powerful, and being good isn't that great because you'll still experience misery. And maybe all the stuff you thought was real isn't. It talks about the uncertainties of life. It talks about all the negative aspects. We end the song with, even my own eyes would never care to know what deep inside ourselves our heart behold. A sky in shards, our world's unraveled parts, impossible to piece as one in our unending dark. The idea that inside human hearts is not good. There might be some parts that are worth exploring, but a lot of it is just a sky of shards, so much space between everything. An unending dark, full of shards that are impossible to piece together as one. People are a lot of things, especially people as a whole instead of a single person. It is impossible to know what people are, what they will do, what their intentions are. We are all as varied as anything else. And a lot of that is darkness. He says he doesn't care to know what's in people's hearts, which follows up really nicely to him saying, you know what? I'm done. I'm just going to cast myself out because I don't fit here. The idea of keeping people at arm's length. Yeah, this album's really starting to take hold, and of course the entire thematic element is coming together rather sharply, and I am wondering if maybe this isn't supposed to be understood sequentially as a series of bad events where he tried to see a brighter side. He tried to get through all this grief only to succumb to the very thing he said he would try not to. I think that was track 4, where he said, I would never, dwell on all this stuff because I know it'll suck me down. And then tracks 5 and 6, he's in the spiral. It feels connected, and now I'm intrigued on where the story goes. All right. Let's wrap this up, moving into the first song of the back half of this album, Broken Things. Okay. Yeah, very atmospheric. Drums are keeping us energetic, but the guitar is just kind of hanging there. Okay, yeah, that's cool. There we go. Any one of these moments, I felt like we could have ramped it back up, and they just didn't. They kept hanging on to their halftime. Snare on 2 and 4 to give it that bouncy feel. Yeah, bringing in the ska instruments. Yeah, very straightforward song. Nice to have that coming off of track 6. Oh, yeah.
My distraction grows in leaps and bounds in every year gone by. My dress is now so lovely penned, the blind would shed a tear. Maybe I don't need the things that you and you need. Maybe I'm the shadow cast on drying grass by dying trees. A scar is only so
Love the bass too. Simple idea, but effective. Rhythmically, atmospherically, harmonically.
Maybe there's a footprint I left a life ago. If so, there must be something beautiful out there somewhere, I know. 'Cause words can only reach the ears of whom you aim to speak. A stone can only roll so far as ground is not too steep.
Oh. Just over a minute to go. They decide to shift gears. Okay. Let's see where they take us. Oh. Is this a transition? I think so. I'm going to rewind it back just a few seconds. So when we come back to it, we'll get a little bit of that piano solo, just in case it is a transition. So yeah, this was an interesting back-to-back. We just came off of a ballad, and we jump right back into the intensity and angst of something like marriage. So we have generally a folk sound at the beginning, and then track 4 is more that country sound, and then we get post-hardcore, ballad, punk, more like straight hardcore, and then, well, whatever 8 was. We'll get into that in a second. It's interesting that the first 4 songs, I would say, are fairly homogenous. And after that, they've just been all over the place, wildly jumping between different styles, sounds, and intensities. Now, track 7, Broken Things. Very punky, very simple, and very loud. I think that's the point of it. It does carry that raw aggression in a similar way to Marriage, but does it in a very different style. Marriage was a bit more complex with more layers in it. It wanted to be a bit more fully featured as far as instrumentation and ideas, and it feels, without throwing any shade on it, it feels more thought out, more expanded. Whereas track 7's Broken Things feels very simple, very surface level. We have a chord progression on our guitars and bass. The bass occasionally does a cool little thing under it, but for a lot of it is just doing the same thing the guitars are doing. And we have yelling on top of that and pretty straightforward drum ideas. We do introduce some really cool stuff towards the end as far as halftime feels that sort of provide a bit of levity. Like, I don't know, like you've been driving a car at like 70 miles an hour, 80 miles an hour or something for a long trip. You've been on a highway for a while. And then you get off the highway and you get into town and you hit a speed limit of like 30. And it's like, it just feels so different. It almost feels like you're light, right? That's sort of what I imagine here. The song just has this full burn intensity for so long, and then you just kind of hit the brakes and slow down, and it's like you don't have that pressure put on you anymore. It feels like you could just float off the ground. Um, and we do reside in that a lot longer than I would expect, especially the second time around on that. I kept like anticipating getting back into the full speed groove, and they just kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. There's such delay to it. But otherwise, I don't think I have anything to add to that one. It's very straightforward, very simple, layered, very simple, harmonically, melodically, rhythmically. It's, like I said during the reaction, a great way to kick us off back after going through the ballad, which felt a bit denser and heavier and more layered, more fully exposed, whereas this is just very surface level. Then we hit Footprints, a short track, not even hitting the 3-minute mark. We get over halfway through the song, and it is just simple. We have a very light bass idea. We have guitar chords with a little bit of riffage going on in there, kind of borderline working between melody and chords. We have a very light drum work and the vocals. We have a rising bit of intensity in a chorus, and then we bring it back down. We reached the halfway point. I'm like, okay, this is just the song. There's not a lot to dig into on this one. And then we have a burst, 25 seconds of just heavy driven hardcore punk. Distorted guitar comes in, bumping up to 16th notes. Drums just have this constant drive going on. It's all about cramming a lot of notes into a small amount of time. And then that goes away, 4-hour single instrument outro. I don't know what all that's supposed to represent. It's called Footprints. I've been trying to think of what that has to do with anything. 3 stages, a low, a high, and a low. I'm not coming to any conclusions. I think this is going to be one where I need the lyrics to fully understand it, which makes sense. As with the most of the songs on this album, the music can certainly tell a story, but it's designed to be a vehicle for the lyrics, and a lot of the songs have made more sense knowing what the lyrical themes are. And that's probably the same thing here with track 8, Footprints. So, let's dive into that. And then, I want to talk a little bit about the band, the album, some information I found on Wikipedia. Usually I do this stuff way earlier in the video, and I just keep forgetting to because I'm like, man, what's the next song going to be about? What's the next song going to be? I'm really into it, but I do want to take a moment to pause here and get into some extra context for this album. At this point, I'm fairly convinced that the good times are behind us. Here's another song about being drenched in sorrow without any positive thought to balance it out. Talks about the weight of loss. Talking about knowing your heroes and finding that they're just human as well. As he states that they're nothing but a boring shade of blue. He says, I know that I'll never sing in tune. I know the truth that beautiful could be wealthy spelt another way. It's the idea that the people he has looked up to, he doesn't really think deserve to be on the pedestal anymore, which is good, I think. That is absolutely a point of maturity, recognizing that even the people we think are great are also, at the end of the day, still human. But it's more than just that loss of innocence. It's also a knowing that they'll never sing in tune, that they'll never fit in with everyone else, that they aren't beautiful in that way. So they don't have monetary wealth, and they can't use their beauty to get through high class society either. They feel that they are just not up to par in so many ways. It's total loss of innocence, and it also is a destruction of self-image. There is a small bit of hope in here, though. It says, let die our spoiled architect burrows, let die our fingerprinted window sorrows. Let us address our wakes by name, say, I'd have the strength to face you, day, save for the broken things in my life. So, we need to get rid of the things that trap us in. We need to stop staring out these windows. They have our fingerprints on them as we gaze upon to things that we can't have. We just need to start doing, right? Stop being depressed. But he recognizes that still at the end of the day, just to face the day itself is still tough. I'd have the strength to get up and face the day, except for all the broken things in my life. The final stanza says, I found the need to stay alive. Reason enough to pay to mind that all of this could mean the world, or be a waste of time. It's the chance of life. That's what he seems to be clinging on to. That these little things he thinks about, the art that he creates, it could change the world. And I think whether he knows it or not, there are probably fans who have listened to these and have had their life touched, and I hope that he knows this. But he also recognizes that all of it could be a waste. Which, assuming that this is coming from the lyricist and not the thoughts of a character they've created, that's always valid. Nobody knows they're going to make it big. In fact, this band didn't seem to make it big. According to Spotify, they only have 2,000 monthly listeners. 5,000 monthly listeners. Many of these songs don't even break 6-digit plays. And being the low number of monthly listeners, it's probably the same few fans listening to the songs over and over and over. So, yeah, to 99.9% of the world, this dude's music doesn't exist. His art, his heart that he threw out there into the world is completely unknown. But there's still that part where some people connected with this. And I hope, like I said, if this is coming from the lyricist, I hope they know that. If nothing else, I'm testament that this art is powerful and absolutely deserves to be here, and it was not a waste of time. And interestingly, the next track, Footprints, is about having a legacy. It's about connecting with people, probably through the art of this band or whatever art they continued on with their life. It says, my distraction grows and leaps and bounds in every year gone by. My address is now so lovely penned, the blind would shed a tear. Maybe I don't need the things that you and you need, and maybe I'm the shadow cast on drying grass and dying leaves. So basically saying, maybe we're all very different, and maybe what I do doesn't reach you. I'm the shadow cast on drying grass and dying trees. Like, there's no water here for the grass, the trees are wilting, and that's where I'm at, in a place of death. But those are only maybes. 2 stanzas later it says, maybe there's a footprint I left long ago. If so, there's something beautiful out there, somewhere. I know. And it's this confidence that their art is worth making. It's just, people need to hear it. Going on to say, words can only reach the ears of whom you aim to speak. A stone can only roll so far as the ground is not too steep. So, yeah, messages, they don't reach everyone. There has to be perfect situations for this kind of stuff. And 5,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, which I don't even think Spotify was around at this time, 2007. It would be right on the cusp. I don't know when Spotify came out, but that was nearing the age of it. But if it was right before, it just really missed the chance for global reach. The ground was too steep at that time, and unfortunately, the stone wasn't really pushed after the ground had been flattened a bit more, after the resistance to spread art had been reduced a bit. He says, "But I aim to speak to generations, to touch but one, drive to tears that something beautiful may never come undone." That's all he wants, is for his artwork to mean something to people. I think it's really cool how the last track leads into this one lyrically. I'm curious then how all the musical components work with this. I mean, the last track was Angry. It's another one of dipping into sorrow. That kind of makes sense for the punk angle. But the folky country stuff for this one that leads into punk, I don't really get. However, I do like the outro. The final concept is wistfulness, wanting something to happen, hoping it will, and that's exactly what that final instrumental bit does. It is a bit depressive, and there's an element in it that is full of despair. But there is hope in it as well. And that's exactly what he says. I aim to speak to generations, and I hope to touch at least one. And that final musical bit, I think, emphasizes that. Alright. The next track is called The Love Between You and I. Let's dive into it. We have about 7 minutes of music here, and then we'll reach our last two songs, put them together. I think it's our shortest track and our second longest track back to back to wrap it up. So let's dive into this, see what's going on with the love between you and I. Yeah, it's a very vague connection where the reverb goes across the tracks, but they're not really connected. Oh yeah, it's like road trip music. Top down, windows down. You know, the vocalist kind of reminds me of that Greg? Let me pull this up real quick. Greg Freeman. Kind of reminds me of that. Oh, you know what? That harmony that we just... They're not going to do it again. It kind of gives me like a 60s feel. A little bit of like a hippie sound, but very out of tune. Yeah, I don't know. Very dissonant though. having that motif. Da 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 da. Very optimistic though. Dang, this song's almost over already. Oh, a fade out. That's the first one for the album. Very twinkly. Started pulling some Midwest emo vibes. The big drums. I wonder if they're gonna do an anthemic thing for the chorus. Oh, cool little riff on the guitar. I mean, chords on the guitar over here, but nice to hear a little bit of that melody writing. Very twinkly. I'm digging that. I've started to notice his vocals are very restrained. I'll touch on that later. See, this also feels very anthemic, but we've never really hit that peak. Maybe there's a branch of wonder left here to believe. There are places with horizons above a level ground. A man's as much as the love he leaves behind in northern towns. An interesting interaction there between the two vocals. It almost sounded digitized, but only when they met on that same note. Yeah, just there's a lot of big moments in there, but it never hits the peak that I expect typically with those sounds. Another one with a lot of silence here. So yeah, about the vocals. I've started to pick up something. He definitely puts a lot of air pressure and projection into his vocals when he does more of the harsh stuff, brings out that compression, the grit on it. But typically, he just seems like he's in a normal speaking range. Not a lot of not a lot of projection. kind of placing it exactly where he would as if he was speaking, but just choosing specific pitches and sitting on specific pitches at time in order to craft melody. And I find that really interesting because there is sort of a spoken word element to the way he presents this stuff. It doesn't feel like he's belting out these notes. It doesn't feel like he's a typical post-hardcore or punk vocalist who is just putting everything into it. It sounds like he's just very casually in front of a microphone singing some songs in a normal singing voice for him. It's probably not too different from his normal speaking tone and speaking placement and air control for speech. It's really interesting because I've even talked about how lyrically, when we look at it, it's just poetry, like really good poetry. As I've spoken it out loud, a few of the stanzas I've wanted to read word for word, it works well in spoken word too. From a certain perspective, I almost think that the lyrics weren't designed to be sung. For all I know, the lyricist just has a book of poems and wanted to go with that. And it also leads into the idea that a lot of the lyrics are linear. We do have some choruses in these tracks, but aside from that, it's like folk music where it just keeps pushing forward. And there isn't really a rhyme pattern to any of the songs. Maybe a stanza will have a rhyme scheme, but that's it. It's not something that's going to be applied wholesale across an entire song. Rhythms, meter of these, it's free poetry. So there's a lot of cool elements to it that I don't think always translate so well to singing. And I think presenting it as a sort of half sung, half spoken kind of mix works really well for this type. And it also makes it feel down to earth. Because it's not some dude shouting at me. I can tell he's in a studio and everything's presented. It makes it also sound a bit live to me, the vocals, especially when you bring in some of the harmonic discrepancies and the dissonance that occurs in them. It feels like I'm right there listening to it more so than it being somebody singing into a microphone and then going into a computer, being processed, then pumped out amps. There's something very natural to all of it. And I appreciate that, especially since I think it adds to the artistic vision of the album, which, yeah, it definitely feels very down to earth and rooted in a lot of ways. As for those two tracks, I don't think I have anything particular to add to either one of them. They're very much continuing on in the vein that we've listened to in most of this album. I do like some of the twinkly stuff we had in track 10, which is called Northern Towns. I don't know what a northern town is for them. Where are they from? Because that song did give me Midwest emo vibes. Oh, they're from Ontario, Canada. I don't know what a northern town is for Canadians, but I mean, from what I understand, there's a lot of places in Canada that are sort of similar to our Midwest in the US. So, yeah, it's possible that there's just a lot of shared experiences in both these areas, and that's why I immediately think of Midwest emo, even northern towns. Midwest area of US is also sort of the northern part of the middle of the United States. So, Texas is in the middle too, but that's not Midwest. We're talking about stuff like, Wisconsin, right up there next to Canada. And so I think calling it Northern Towns and having these twinkly math rock style things and sort of more of an emo harmonic element to it, it absolutely connects with me as a US person who's never been to Canada, but I know this feeling musically. So I thought that was pretty cool. The Love Between You and I also showcased a bit of a brighter sound overall. Actually, so did Northern Towns. It feels like we've gone back to some of the brightness that we had at the beginning of the album, more so than the anger and darkness and aggression we've been experiencing in the last four or so tracks. And I wonder if lyrically we're going to be pushing back into that direction as well. But it's a nice uplift, which worries me. A way to make massive impact on the final 6 minutes of the album. by giving us all this darkness and then being actually things are doing better. Actually, they're terrible. And just like bringing us up a little bit to just drop us down even further. I don't know. I haven't quite reached a conclusion on what the themes of the album are in totality. Of course, there is battling depression. There is existential dread. There is negativity, but there's always a piece of brightness. Usually, there's a couple of tracks that are like, nope, things suck, and I'm sad about it. But most of the tracks are like, there's always a way to look at this stuff that's a little bit brighter, a little bit better, a way to push through to the other side, an acknowledgement that there is another side to the sorrow. But we've been so far into the darkness for a while now that I'm kind of skeptical. I'm like, are we really going for a brighter edge to the ending? I kind of get a feeling that it's related to microphones and even Mount Erie, where it is going to be a depressive album overall. But right now, I don't know. I'm sort of teetering. They're showing an uplift, but are we actually going to end on a bright note? The last two tracks are called Husbands and Chimes and Churchbells, and this comes after The Love Between You and I, which makes me think that we have a little bright ending here at the end, but all of this could just be memories of the past, and being a husband and getting married and having this love. So let's get into some lyrics, see what's going on in this set of songs, and then we'll wrap up this whole album. The love between you and I brings many of the themes to a head. We speak about leaving an impression, wanting to be remembered for something. It says, maybe in a lifetime, the ones like me will resurrect my monument immortal, but tarnished, I suspect, hoping that there's a monument for me in the future, after I've long passed. But they wager that whatever lasting opinion people will have of him will eventually be tarnished. Which lines up with a lot of things. Wanting to have an impact on people's lives, but not feeling like they're worthy of it. That they don't have the right words. That they can't sing the right way. That they're not pretty enough to be remembered. There's also the idea of... Where was I going with that? Oh, yeah. Heroes. Putting them up on pedestals, only to find out that they're not as great as you imagined them to be. This is the reversal of that, where in one of the previous songs he said, my heroes are not who I thought they were. Now it's people will hold me up as a hero and find out that eventually I'm not as great as they thought I was either. My reputation will have been tarnished over time. He says that this will also hold my generation's failures in song, the jailhouse holding all of our years undone, the passing of the time we killed when we were young, the archives of our blessed few, and all that we've done wrong or hadn't done at all. It's not just going to be a monument to me, it's going to be a monument to us, my whole generation. And it's easier to sum up the shortcomings, which is what's probably going to be in there. The generation's failures, how we just killed time when we were younger. It says, yeah, there'll be archives of the blessed few, but also of everything that we've done wrong or didn't do at all. The end of the track says, though, despite all this, I'm going to live my best life. It says, I'll mind my future as the sunlight trends to life through though my divinity may tightrope the sharpest knife. Because I have none of what lies above, beyond the stars and skies, beyond the flight of doves. I don't have anything particularly special to me. And I'm not the most divine of person. But even though there might not be a future ahead of me, I'm still going to live my best life because that's what I need to do. As he mentioned a couple of tracks ago, he found a reason to live. Even though there's just darkness and hurt all around him, he still pushes on. I think it's interesting to pull all this together in this track that has this uplift to it. This is the moment in the album where things look a little bit brighter. And the song, while it does have a bright ending to it, is about how the future will not be kind to our history. Which is maybe accurate. It's a lot easier to write about the negatives of things that have happened in the past, and typically people are more interested in that, too. You don't see too many documentaries about the suburban family who just did what they were supposed to do every day and got into no trouble. That's not a really good story to tell. So, yeah, it's an understanding that time will not be kind to us, most likely. But still, gotta live my best life. Northern towns. I like this message. It is, at least from my perspective, a call to change what it means to be a man. I want to particularly focus on the chorus here, though I will jump back to the verses to back some of this up. But it says, maybe a man is worth the weight of what his eyes have seen. Not what they do, but what they've experienced. Maybe there's a branch of wonder left here to believe. To always have a curiosity, to keep that childlike instinct of asking questions rather than pretending to know everything. It says there are places with horizons above a level ground, a man's as much as the love he leaves behind in northern towns. Almost as if to say that the amount of people who miss you due to your connection with them when you leave an area is what a man should be measured by. Again, not about what you did, not about who your crew is or who you intimidated or how big of a bro you are, but how many people legitimately are going to miss you when you leave? What is your impact on the people around you? How much of that left a positive element or an improvement in people's lives? I really love this whole perspective on it. And this is backed up a little bit as well with our verses. The first verse specifically says, do away with that which makes a moment so discreet. We hesitate, ashamed to really laugh or really weep. The idea that men are supposed to be stoic. You can't cry in front of people. You can't cry ever, honestly. You're not being a man, you're a baby. That kind of thing. You can't be in touch with your emotions or you're not a man. And he says we need to get away with that. We need to move away from that and explore something else. And connecting with people, being emotional around people and emotionally available. That's what this song's about. I can get behind that. The second verse says, make it so what makes us mindful without reprimand falls behind the eyes of every man. So the things that cause us to think and become introspective rather than loud and vulgar and whatever, that's what we need to put into every man's mind. Put it behind every eye. It says, if the story of our lives becomes our suffering, penned and left, begin to recount every time you ever really wept. Think about the times you cry. It's important to become connected with yourself, to not disconnect oneself from their emotions. I really like that. This whole song is just beautiful. And it fits with the themes too. It is a longing for something different, for something better. That's what this album really is about. Things are not always good. Maybe they're better tomorrow. Occasionally, maybe they're not. And everything sucks and everything's bleak and I just want to curl up into a ball and forget about everyone. But every time we have a song like that, we come out the other side with a little bit of brightness, a return. You can always escape out of that pit. There's still two songs of lyrics left, so we'll see how strong my theory stands, but I think that's really what this album is about. Life is painful. There's suffering to it. And sometimes that can make us feel utterly defeated. But there's good too, and sometimes we have to work towards that. And so let's hope that tomorrow is better than today. Let's jump into our final batch of songs here. We have Husbands on track 11, and then Chimes and Churchbells on track 12.
We, the black streak bag-eyed husbands, move waiting to be widowed by the passing of familiar skies and all we've come to know. Our shadows have my sympathy, 'cause they must never wish to be joined beneath unwillingly our endless restless feet. So praise be the break of day when we run out of things to say. We learn to speak in different ways. So plead with the cities to be breathing. May beauty make them bend and sway. We learn to speak in different ways. Our lust caught, frozen in the streetlight.
Yeah, I just got done talking about how his vocals are very spokeny. These are very sung, projected, directed. This has that punk energy to it. A little bit of a turn here, bringing the energy down. Well, the energy is still going forward, just kind of brought the atmosphere down. Okay. Very iterative, but it works so well there to keep that energy a bit lower, surprise the listener, come in super punchy. Alright, high energy pop punk, couple of breaks in there. How do we wrap the album up? Oh.
When the time comes for marriages to end, when all the black gowns are called and sent,
Somber and heavy. Not a ballad like I predicted, though.
For wishing death before the contracts ended, when all the black gowns are higher end, or does the suffering? They don't see the beauty on the power wires, or of an honest man in poor attire. But I've heard a hope in the faceless man you know you'll never meet. I've heard a life in those who love so very effortlessly, who live forever.
Dude, the guitar just sounding like a saw.
To leave behind for those they love, a lot of time to weep. When the time comes for marriages to end, will the world wait while we address with poignancy enough to drown the cry ahead, speaking humanly enough to free us from ourselves?
What's interesting is that it kind of is a ballad. It's just the wrong palette for it. But compositionally, this could be a ballad.
Something special will recede, as something boring swells. It finds your ears like chimes and church bells. I've heard a hope in the faceless man you know you'll never meet. I've heard a life in those who love so very effortlessly, who live forever in a state of vulnerability, to leave behind for those they love a lot of time to wait.
That's it. I don't know. Husbands, let's just start out. Husbands is very straightforward pop punk, very bright, very energetic, lots of energy, some cool guitar ideas, and we brought back some of the shouty, screamy vocal delivery too, which was funny because I just got done talking about how his vocals tend to sound a bit like they did on that last track, where it's a very comfortable speaking range and probably a lot of muscular things are very close to spoken word. He's just holding pitches out. So yeah, we go to something that's very energetic vocally, very energetic drumming, guitar work. It is a bit on the simple side. The structure is to be expected, working with verse, chorus, bridge. And it is short. It doesn't even hit 3 minutes. It does its one thing. It does it long enough to not get boring about it, and it heads out. Very in and out. Let's wrap this up quick. And it's leads us into the final track, Chimes and Churchbells. Very much a ballad if you listen to just the chord progression and the vocals. But there's an energy to it that doesn't fit a ballad style. It's got a distortion to it, a fuzziness. We have the buzzsaw drone in the background through most of it. There's sections that have these really big swells and are rather tense despite the somber chord progressions going on. It's a mixture of a lot of emotions, which sort of makes sense to me. See, here's the thing. We've gone through a lot of genres, right? They've showcased a lot of ability to write within a lot of different styles. Here, though, they decided to ditch their general instruments in favor for something that might as well be electronic. I think it is just guitars making most of the sounds here, but there's also a part of me that thinks, oh dang, we never went and did the Wikipedia context. Well, the album's over. Let's dive into some of that in a second. I don't think I saw anything about a keyboardist, but I really do think that's a synthesizer there at the end. Either that, or they can just get a guitar tone to last forever, and I don't know how they do that. Tons of reverb and distortion, I'd wager. I don't know. But musically, you listen to the chord progression, you listen to the melody, uh, how that's done, you listen to the pacing of it all. It's a ballad. It's slow, it's somber. There are these moments of uplift that kind of have a little bit of clarity to everything, but they typically resolve back down into something a bit darker, something a bit sadder. And all of it is done at such a glacial pace. For most of it, anyways. So when those rises do come in and make it feel like the song is gaining all this energy, this direction, this momentum, it sort of feels out of place to me. And especially when you pair it with this sound that we haven't explored at all on this album. It's very interesting to explore all of these different timbres here. Where was I going? Why did I bring up genre? I don't remember now. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out what this ending is. I mean, like, atmospherically, emotionally, I think it fits. We'll get into the lyrics and see what they're exploring there. But sonically, they decided to switch up their entire palette for the final 4 minutes of the album, and I guess some bands do that. I mean, we have death metal bands doing acoustic guitar ballads or symphonic things, strings and choirs to wrap up an album. I guess it's not totally unexpected for a massive shift. It also just feels kind of odd, though. I don't know. Maybe it's just because it was so unexpected and I don't get it. I think that's the main thing right there. Is if I could see the connection, if I could understand the purpose of these tones, maybe that would make more sense. Maybe something in the lyrics make it make sense. But just sitting where I am, I can't understand how this makes any connections to the 40 minutes of music we listened to prior before. I mean, to reiterate compositionally, this belongs on the album. It's just a weird sonic palette. A shift that doesn't seem to complement any of the other shifts they've had. They've been a band who is a chameleon, jumping between all sorts of different genres. A genre change shouldn't be out of character, and yet it is. I do think the overall pacing on the album, though, it works well. As I mentioned, we had lows, then we had highs in the middle, lots of tension, lots of darkness. Bring it back down to lows, and then that very low energy ending. Not as tense either. Let me hit some lyrics on these two. See what's going on there. Either this dude just took his writing up to another level, or getting a bit fatigued doing all this lyrical analysis. This one goes right over my head. It speaks about a bunch of black-streaked, bag-eyed husbands. It's tired, weary, right? It says they move, waiting to be widowed by the passing of familiar skies and all we've come to know. What? The passing of familiar skies. Just time? Time is going to make them widows? The second stanza I find to be interesting. It says, our shadows have my sympathy, for they never wish to be joined beneath unwillingly our endless restless feet. I like this idea. I wonder if this is a metaphor for children, specifically even maybe male children to these husbands, about raising the next generation. of men specifically. I don't know if I would have come to this conclusion had it not been for northern towns, specifically bringing up a concept of manliness. But yeah, the idea of something bound to us that never asked to even exist in the first place, but are forced to live the same journey we did, and having sympathy for that. It says, so praise be the break of day when you run out of things to say, we'll learn to speak in different ways, and plea with cities to be breathing for beauty made them bend and sway, we'll learn to speak in different ways. I mean, is this also a companion song to northern towns about hoping that the generations who come after us, when we run out of ways to do the things we've done, to find new ways to speak, new ways to be? Continuing on the idea of sons and, continuing generations, which is also something that has been brought up multiple times on this album. But I don't know. The last stanza doesn't really mean much to me at all. And so I'm just kind of left with questions moving into the final track of the album, which is not a great place to be on an experience, an artwork that is so heavily lifted by the lyrical content, the narrative, the thematic cohesion. I'm going to go into this and hope that it makes more sense than this track did. Alright, and we do wrap up the album with ways of tying many of these themes together. It is about the future. It is also about men, and it's also um about relationships and finding connections between people and many of these ideas. And it's also about silver lining, viewing things from a positive perspective, even if those incidents are negative. Specifically, this seems to talk about the end of relationships, particularly marriages. In fact, the first line is when the time comes for marriages to end, when all the black gowns are called and sent to darken doors and pay them penance for wishing death before their contracts end. It's a very flourishy way of relating divorces to death, to a funeral, and speaking about the ends of contracts. A marriage is supposed to be until death do us part. Traditionally, when you listen to most traditional vows, sort of like a contract. This relationship stays together until one of us dies, and then this is saying we want to end this before the contract would have obliged it. It speaks about hopelessness. Sorry, it speaks of hope found in faceless men that the singer knows they'll never meet. I've heard of life in those who love so effortlessly, who live forever in a state of vulnerability, to leave behind for those they've loved a lot of time to weep. This idea that despite the fact that I have seen men suffer from the loss of relationships like this, who have been really hurt, that they found hope, that they still love and experience relationships with other people, not keeping everyone at arm's reach, allowing themselves to be vulnerable. It says who live forever in a state of vulnerability, who allow themselves time to cry. I have seen people like this. I want to be like that. The song ends with abandonment makes for something heartfelt and find your ear, like chimes and church bells. Something special will recede as something boring swells and find your ear like chimes and church bells. Despite the pain that comes from the end of a relationship, whether that is someone being taken from you early or just someone not wanting to be in this relationship anymore and finding yourself within a gap, a hole, a void that needs to be filled. To reference, I think that was track 2. despite this pain and sorrow, beautiful things can come from it. Heartfelt things. Special things. You just have to be open to them. Like the people who are hurt and burned repeatedly and yet don't block people out from their lives. Treat them as the heroes so that you might look up to them and say, I want to be more like that, and become someone who is vulnerable and emotionally available to the people you love so that you might change their lives. And when you have to leave them, maybe you have to leave a northern town, the impact you've made is a positive one, and you'll be defined by the love that you leave behind. Yeah, it's a beautiful way to end this album and really tie together a lot of things: legacy, uh, generations, manlyhood, manliness, what it means to be a man, um, pain, suffering, seeing things better on the other side. Yeah, I find it interesting then that if it ties the themes lyrically together so well, why doesn't it do the same musically? Is it supposed to be this full introspective shift, a change of heart, a change of mind, to drastically change the palette of the album in order to incorporate this idea of someone who views the world differently now? I don't know. It's also a very somber song. Even some of our other tracks that have been a bit more melancholic have still had the upbeat energy of rock in them, and this doesn't. This is the heaviest song, and yet it's the most optimistic lyrically. I wish I could understand the decision that went into the musical element of this track. I think otherwise it is a phenomenal way to wrap up the album and basically put a nice bow on every single lyrical theme it's explored. Musically, up to this point, we had a really nice job of exploring a lot of musical ideas, all the different facets of rock and punk that we had seen so far. A little bit of jazz and ska thrown in there. It would have been nice to have felt some sort of resolution musically for all of that here as well, rather than to end the album the most traditionally with a pop rock song that doesn't really explore any of the extra facets, and then this quasi electronic somber one to end the album. It feels like an interesting decision to me, one I don't quite understand, but I don't necessarily want to put down either. I can't make heads or tails of it, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't thought put into it, and given that so many other elements of this album seem to be very intentional in what they do, even when things seem to be at a schism. In fact, if you remember right at the beginning of the album, I mentioned the production was very clean, the instruments were very pristine, and yet the vocals were raw. That eventually grew on me. I just needed more time to understand it. It's possible I just need more time with this ending to figure out what its aim is, what their intentions are with it. But otherwise, I really love this album and how it wraps up lyrically. Just bringing all of its themes together and saying there is hope, we can be better. We need to put the effort forth for it. Those are my thoughts. Attack in Black's Marriage. I'm still trying to figure out what the album title has to do with all of this. It certainly fits into a couple of the songs, but I don't know that it necessarily fits a larger idea of things. I don't know. If you have thoughts, opinions, or perspectives on any of this, particularly those some of the places I didn't quite understand what was going on, please leave those comments down in the comment section. If you just want to give me your thoughts, opinions, or perspectives about any of it, do that as well. Anything you'd like to correct me on or add on to what I stated, toss that stuff down there. Above that, in the description box, there's a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, links to the Discord server, ways to support the channel, all sorts of stuff. Go ahead and check it out. Did I say links to my music? My brain's fried. I don't remember what I said. There's a lot of stuff. Go look it up. It's got a lot of buttons. They take you places. There's cool things there. Just, yeah. Like, subscribe, ring the bell. That kind of stuff helps the channel out. I appreciate it if you could do any of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow morning, at least for me, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 3 p.m. UTC. We're going to do a 2-hour live stream, check out some music, hang out, just chit-chat. Very low stakes, very chill. None of the hyper analysis we do here normally. We just get to listen to some cool music, and I'll give my thoughts about it. More of a traditional reaction, I suppose. I do try to still put a little bit of an analytical twist on it. We just don't spend 25 to 30 minutes on every song. Like I said, we do have room to just chit chat about stuff, whatever comes up, whatever tangent I get thrown on. We talk about genre, we talk about language, talk about video games sometimes, movies, whatever. It's just real chill. If that sounds cool, dive into that. Otherwise, I'll be back Monday. We're going to start next week's theme. I don't remember what it is. Man, I honestly don't. Anyways, get psyched for that. We don't even know what's coming up, so that'll be a cool surprise. Anyways, always remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos. Hey, real quick, editor Bryan here. 2 minutes and 48 seconds of when the credits started, which means I was pretty much spot on with my guess there. So that's pretty cool. I missed my prediction about the final track being a what do they call it? A ballad, but I got the length of the video prediction right, so that's cool. Enjoy the rest of this jingle.